Rod, it's 6:32. Whenever you might want to get started, or
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just trying
it's
to
up to you.
welcome everybody. I'm just trying to coordinate and make sure I got all my right pages up here. I'm just going to share my screen, Troopty, and that way we can have the agenda up on the screen there. So, and it looks like Sung is here, so we can. I thought I'd save Sung until about 7 p.m. if that's okay with you, Sung. We've got a couple of things that we want to talk about. And I just got a text from one of the people that wanted to present something tonight. Jasper from
He's on.
I'm here.
Oh, there you go, Jasper. Hey, cool.
Hi.
Good to see you. Sorry, I didn't. It only had a couple of people on my thing there. Need to expand that out. Cool. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to get started because we're a few minutes past the 6:30 starting time, and hopefully a few more people will log on here. We've got a pretty light agenda. So we've asked Sung from the city of Denver to come talk about NPI today, and start a series we thought we'd have of detailed discussions and how they're going to affect Sunnyside and therefore and that sort of thing as the NPI starts to get more brought on board. So let's start off and we'll go right down the agenda. First item is to approve tonight's agenda. If everybody's looked through it, if anybody sees any changes they need to make or anything, let me know now. And if not, we'll go ahead and will somebody approve the agenda and we'll move on forward.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody see anything from previous meeting or recordings that they'd like to bring up or see needs to be corrected? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next one. Public comment period. We have a 10-minute section here where if anybody wants to bring up any new items, it's just an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments about anything you see, any items you may want to see on the agenda in the future, anything that you see that we're doing right or wrong, those type of things. Anybody want to bring any of that up?
Well, I'll add a comment for just a public comment period. We have our 44th Avenue corridor walk tour this Saturday, and I'm going to drop I
was just going to drop that into the chat.
Yep, RSVP in the chat. Although I think everybody on here is at least, most of the folks are already aware of it. Jasper, I don't know if you live in Sunnyside or own in Sunnyside.
I do. I've lived in Sunnyside since 2004.
Oh,
Right.
excellent. We're doing a walk of shop, we're calling it, of the 44th Avenue corridor, because we've heard a lot of things about what people want to see, not want to see, a lot of what they don't want to see. And this is just an opportunity for us to get people together and start collecting that information and the documentation on what it is that they'd like to see.
Fantastic.
So yeah, if you can join, it's 8:30 Saturday morning. I think we have about 20 people, and we'll probably have more like 25. I think some of the organizers, including myself, I don't think I've even signed up for it yet. So I think we'll have somewhere around 25 people, and we're going to start at Sunnyside Supper Club at 8:30 and walk down to Radiator, and then have, coffee and bagel and discussion at Radiator.
And I just dropped in the chat the link to that sign up there. Survey, and it'll take you to the screen that you see on your screen now. So just sign up there, but the link is in the chat if you want to be a part of that.
And I've got one more announcement. Tomorrow there is a Reggie Rama movie night on Regis campus, and a multiple RNOs, including Sunnyside, Highlands United, Berkeley Regis, Harkness Heights, is working together with Regis to do a fundraiser for Bienvenidos. So there's going to be hot dogs, hamburgers, ice cream for sale, $10 a plate, and all the proceeds are going to go directly to Bienvenidos. That's tomorrow night starting at 6:30, free movie. There's a band actually that plays from 6:30 until the movie starts. So music, food, free movie, if anybody wants to join. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Anything else anybody wanted to bring up? All righty, I'll move on. Our next agenda item is we've got Melissa here to give us a District 1 update. Hi, Melissa.
Hi there. So I will drop a link here to our land use slides for anyone that does not have that. There is just a few things that we will discuss here. Sung is here. So again, this is, we're encouraging everyone to participate in the Near Northwest Area Plan. There are many ways to do so that are all listed in the PowerPoint here. So let me drop this into the chat, sorry. And then a reminder that we do have the new ADU standards that are now in effect. Those went in effect on July 5th and will apply to any applications received after June 30th. We're really excited about that, and the increase that you can have in square footage of that is up to 864 square feet for lots 7,000 square feet and less, which is a big deal. Then it talks a little bit about Waste No More, the ordinance that voters passed in November 2022. Starting June 1st, it requires nearly all construction and demolition projects to separate and recycle at a minimum all readily recyclable concrete, asphalt, clean wood, scrap metal, and corrugated cardboard. So there's a little bit of information on that, which is a great thing.
Was that June 1st, 2023 or next year?
It is. No.
Wow.
June 1st, 2023. We are in effect.
Great. Thank you.
So yeah, if you look at that, you can see that there is some paperwork they have to file to get their demolition permit. So their plans and then how they executed their plans. So there's some help for contractors completing their permits. There's been a lot of issues that people are running into when they're trying to install these more eco-friendly products that are rebatable. So there is some information on permitting heat pumps and other of the things that contractors are struggling with on that page. Then we have the 2022 building and fire code updates. Not super exciting for most. That said, there was a couple things in there. Most notably, some people were running into issues creating their ADU. If you were mid-block and you had tried to create an ADU, often you would, or not often, but sometimes you would run into an issue where the fire department required a hose to be able to be wrapped around the ADU and still stretched to the fire hydrant. And people weren't able to meet that requirement and were having to install sprinkler systems in their ADU at a significant cost. So this updates and gets rid of that. So that's our, very exciting thing. For Sunnyside, we are thrilled that the La Raza Park Historic Cultural Designation did pass. So that is now has a cultural designation to protect the park, the kiosko, the artwork that is inside the kiosko, the murals. So it's the journey mural, the kiosko itself, and the sculpture La Raza Unida that the councilwoman helped fund outside of that. As a reminder, it does not prevent Denver Parks and Rec from doing routine maintenance on the park. It won't, cause them any problems repairing anything or replacing old things like the playground or replacing the basketball courts eventually. So that won't be affected, but we are very excited that it is now designated. So that is pretty much what I have this month, not much.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was easy and painless. I just had one question for you.
Sure.
I have a couple of projects in where I was waiting they already were submitted earlier last year, and I'm waiting for their ADU projects, and I was waiting for the new stuff to go through because I had some stuff I wanted to get in. Can they apply the new stuff, the stuff that's already been submitted, or do I have to resubmit entirely?
I would ask them specifically that. It's my understanding when we have spoken to them that you may need to resubmit. I'm happy to ask them if you're not able to get a response.
No, I'll talk to my reviewers on both of them. I mean, I was just waiting, and I just told the clients, I said, let's just wait till the new rules go through, and then we can get some more stuff out of this. And so I'll follow up. Thanks though.
No problem.
All righty. So that was our agenda, and then I had in there for the next item was kind of left over from the last one, but this was the announcement for the workshop coming up this Saturday morning at 8:30, 8 to 10. So Troopy's already made that announcement there, and we're going to start there at the Sunnyside Supper Club. So hopefully everybody here can try to make it, and let your neighbors and friends know. If, and like I said, you can copy and paste the sign up sheet there at the top of the chat.
Hey,
So let's go.
Hey, Rod.
Yeah.
I think you sent the chat direct message to me only. Please make that it for everyone, or I can do it while you keep moving on. Go ahead. Moving on, I'll do it.
Yeah, there. Well, I got it. Here you go.
Okay.
Sorry. There you go. Okay. The next item, and I don't know if someone's here for this one. It was supposed to be Hunter Floyd for an just a brief update on their project at 4155 Jason Street. They had some stuff they were going to maybe postpone for a full presentation, but Troopy had reached back out to say, well, if you can give us an update, that would be great. But I don't see anybody here that's for them. So we'll just go, and Jasper, that puts you up. And I didn't know how you wanted to do this. I did load up your guys' stuff here, or if you'd like me to share the screen, if you have that presentation that you put together, the architectural drawings.
Yeah.
Whatever works best for you.
It's my first land use meeting, and so I think I can handle it though with the Zoom. But first, just wanted to say hello, introduce myself. My name is Jasper Gray. This is my girlfriend Christine.
Hi.
We live like between 38th and 39th on Tejon. I've lived in Sunnyside since 2004. I moved to Denver in 1998. I've always lived on the north side, and love it here. And I think a few years ago, we started to consider the idea of popping the top on our house, with the effort to kind of stay in the neighborhood. And I think, just like live with the equity we have here, and just really kind of like, make the house better without having to scrape it or move or do any of those kind of more drastic things. So we've been learning as we go with this process that you guys are probably have a lot more experience with. I'll introduce my architect. This is Jonas DiCaprio, who's a handsome fellow down there on your screens. We met him early in this process, and I think Christine and I both really were sold when we saw a remodel he had done on like I think 37th and Raleigh, 36th and Raleigh area, where he was able to really, I think, transform this house while keeping as much of the character and the brick that was there. So it felt like a natural evolution of the neighborhood rather than bringing in something completely new. And that's exactly what we want to do with our home here. As you guys know, lots of these houses are old. The lots are different. Everything's a little bit, crazier when they were built over 100 years ago than what modern codes now. And so we've learned that we would require to go up in front of the Board of Adjustments to ask for a variance, just involving kind of going up above our existing wall on the north side of our property. And Jonas, jump in if you think I'm making a mistake or saying things the wrong way. But essentially, like what we're hoping to do with the variance process is allow us to go up straight from the existing wall into the edge of the bulk plane, rather than having to step that over and kind of like come up with an architectural solution that doesn't really fit the neighborhood, isn't really practical for building, and would likely kind of cause a hardship inside in terms of like usable space and just like how it would work, and probably down the road in terms of like how the water would sort of drain and those sorts of important things that I don't quite understand. But anyway, yeah, just was excited to meet Rod and learn a bit more about what you guys are doing in the neighborhood and be more involved in what's going on here. Obviously lived here a long time and haven't been as involved as I should have been. But I think we'd love to share the plans and kind of explain kind of what we're doing and why we think that it's really, looking to make things more consistent in the neighborhood rather than less. And hopefully like leave with you guys' support on the matter as we go into the Board of Adjustments. Can I share now?
Yes, you should be able to share.
Pretty-
I was just going to make a couple of comments. What basically what Jasper and Jonas are doing is they have the house sits to the north property line on the site, very close. I think it's like
12
a foot
inches.
away. It's a foot away.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's super close. And it's one of these narrow lots. We've talked about these before in the meetings, where it's only 37.5 feet wide, I believe. And unfortunately, to go up, that makes it very challenging to put a second floor in. So I met with them a few weeks ago, and they're basically coming to us to look for support. And so if Jasper, you want to share your screen and show the plans, they're really looking to see if they can get our support for just doing this project this way, because like Jonas alluded to, or Jasper alluded to, they want to stay in the neighborhood. They kind of want to maintain and keep as much of the existing house as they can. And so, yeah. Did we just lose? Oh, there you go, Jasper.
Trying to share. I think it might be having trouble. Let me see if this works.
I can share my screen too, and if you just want to walk it through, and that way you and Jonas, if this is not working.
Unfortunately,
I think you have to set the settings.
my settings might be wrong. So sorry
Rob, why
about
don't
that.
you pull it up. It would just be easier.
Yep,
Yeah,
I'll go
thank
ahead and
you.
I'll just share my screen here really quick.
While you're pulling it up, I have two questions. One, have you already applied for this variance? And two, have you spoken to the surrounding neighbors? And have you gotten, have you talked to them about this and what their thoughts are? So, I mean, that's one of the things that we'd be looking for, is that you've talked to your neighbors, who are the folks who are most impacted by anything you do there.
Absolutely, yeah. And Jonas, I believe that we've got the permit part. I think is in. We're like, but Jonas can correct me if I'm wrong on that. We have been very.
Permit and variance application are different. I just want to make sure. I'm trying to figure out whether variance application has been put in, or are you waiting for, support from us before you start that process?
We've done the full zoning submittal and review, and we are now right at the point where we're getting our informal denial, and now we'll be referred to the BOA for our hearing.
Okay. Yep.
Yes. And just to your question is that, yeah, we've been working on this project for a couple of years. And I think just the neighbors have changed in that process. We've been very open with them. The neighbor to our north, which would obviously be like the most impacted, is that he's no longer living in that home, and that's now a short-term rental. So it's been like the communication has stopped, since it's just basically Airbnb tenants in that house now. So we are actively being as communicative as possible. Everyone has been supportive, but just that neighbor has been like, it's been harder to reach. I think honestly that with the rental situation there, they would prefer to just not be part of any process. So that's kind of where that stands. And obviously, when we go up for the BOA, it will be posted. And so that would hopefully, kind of the people who don't know, who we haven't met. But everyone that we've talked to on our block, we're pretty friendly with, seems to be very open to what we're doing. And I do feel like, because the bulk plan will be honored, that, it's really just a small issue, but I mean, that's obviously my opinion. Maybe Jonas can sort of explain a little bit more, kind of like what
Yeah,
is that?
Jasper, can we go, or Rod, can we go to A300? Can we just look at that front elevation? I think what Jasper alluded to is that we did keep the second story down low enough to basically stay within, we're within the bulk plane. We're not asking for any variance as far as the bulk plane. It's literally only the setback on the north. Let's go to, yeah, maybe just the regular elevation, Rod, if we can, just the straight on. Yeah, there it is.
Let's see, A202.
That's it.
Okay.
Up higher. I think it's A200. All right.
Oh, here we go.
There it is. Yep. And you'll
I'm
see there.
I'm just going to scroll in on that.
That's it. That's the one right
There you
there. Yeah, that's a really good view of it. So the current brick home from 1901 sits at 1 foot off that north property line. All of them along that block do do very similar, all the same era homes. And then our structure just continues right along, rests on top of that existing exterior wall to maintain that structure. But you can see we're within that bulk plane. So our ask is really that 24 inches on that second floor.
As I'm looking at this,
I just wanted to bring up a screen. Here's the.
thank you.
Yeah, there we go. And you can see that how large the south neighbor is towering over us.
Yeah. So this is 3830. This is the house we're talking about. So you can see that both other houses are larger already in mass and scale.
You got it. And we basically time out almost identical to the house to the north with the new addition.
And is that the Denver Square or the one on the other side?
To the left.
This
yeah,
here.
that guy. Yep.
So this is the east side of the street. For those not familiar with Tejon, and so north is to your left on your screen.
Thank you.
So they're in the shadow of the Denver Square, and here I'll just go down. And well, it's kind of tough, but you can see it's not a tremendously larger home, but it's also justified to the north property line in itself because it's got the alley there.
You got it. Yep.
So,
and then Jasper, as Jasper's home is, you can see how close we are to 38 there as far as when it jumps back up to the, the commercial mixed use.
Yeah.
Were there two variances that you needed? I looked at your document really quickly earlier today, and I think you guys had a couple of things. So what are the two things? One is the setback.
We made the design revision to eliminate the other one that was regarding the porch. So we're only dealing with the setback.
Okay.
And those were some of the things that I talked through with them, because originally they thought there might be three things that they got back with comments. And I think, Jonas, correct me if I'm wrong, you got corrections from the reviewer after talking to her on some of the other things that are going to be okay.
Yes, as far as the overlay and the porch structure, as far as the designation on the porch, yes.
Yeah.
And what are the hardships? I mean, I look at this and I'm like, I'm okay with it, right? But it's not going to be us, and regardless of whether we support or not, the BOA follows very specific guidelines about what, when and where, and how, when they approve. So in terms of your hardships, what are the hardships? And, and I'm just asking, like, do you think it's a hardship that is going to fly with, Board of Adjustments?
So I've done the house on Raleigh Street was nearly identical that I had done to this, where they're in that, the existing condition is obviously not created by the current homeowners. So that sort of follows in the line of what that hardship verbiage. And for us, I've done it in two different ways in this exact scenario. One, where stepping that second story back, especially on a north side, it has structural implications as far as we're creating a whole new line of structure within a 1900 home that then has to carry down into a foundation system below. And this is obviously just a shallow brick foundation. The other longer term thing, the other component that I've had, especially in dealing with like landmarks in historic districts, is you just never would have seen a second story addition put onto a home like this, where they would have stepped back that 24 inches. And there's no other ones along either side of this block where that's occurred, where it's created that sort of wedding cake form. And I think the other thing that Jasper just mentioned briefly is that the time when I have set these north sides back, it has caused a long-term maintenance issue where the amount of ice damming and water that gathers along that north side, it's really, really hard to even get those areas to melt out during certain times of the winter here because our sun is so low. And so what it causes damage with not only the thaw and the freeze, and the thaw and the freeze, it pulls the gutters and the fascia and other parts apart, and it ends up causing a lot of damage to the brick structure below. So that was what we were really trying to avoid with just allowing ourselves to continue that facade and then get all of that water away.
So just for some clarity here, this little area, if you guys can see my mouse going here, this is the area we're talking about. They aren't talking about adding a full 8-foot wall along that. You can see it's only, is that about 4 feet, Jonas?
You got it. It's 4 feet inside. It's really, really low.
And so I wanted to show this just because at first I was like, well, that's a pretty, I don't know if you'll get it because it is only 1 foot away from the property line, but this is the ask that they're going for, is this small area here. And I wanted to get a sense. So I also asked them, like, what are they doing? Why could it be a hardship to need that? And I just wanted to show, because this struck me when you guys explained to me what's going on. If you look at the floor plan, that additional square footage actually has a pretty big impact on the usability of how he's laid out the rooms here. And what they're really getting is just barely above countertop level for a laundry room. Obviously the stairs will be coming up, so they're using that pretty wisely to get up that low ceiling height and get up from the stairs. And then of course they can get a little bit wider bedrooms that they would lose that. So this struck me, Jonas, when you guys showed me this the first time. And I think that's important for people to see, that it kind of gives you a neat little area to tuck some of the things that don't need full height ceilings into.
Correct. Yeah.
From a design standpoint, like I think, what we want to do is keep the brick essentially. We want to keep the character of the neighborhood as much as we can. As I've learned even more, like to do a remodel like this as opposed to like, starting from scratch is really kind of more expensive. But we feel like from a, like the way that it affects the neighborhood, I think in a positive way is kind of a lot of what's driving kind of this design decisions. So I think that the aesthetics for the neighborhood, I think, are really important for me as well. And it's hard to sort of see how like this would work without this variance, in terms of, to do a project of this that you would be concerned about the architectural integrity of the brick wall, below the structure, and also like the long-term implications of the damage, as well as just the lack of usable space in there. So, I'm a big supporter of, like rules that keep the neighborhood, that keep the character of the neighborhood, and encourage scraping, or encourage like not to scrape, encourage like, remodel and building and working in the styles of the neighborhood as much as possible. As we see this neighborhood changing around us, I think sometimes we can see things change for the better, and sometimes you see things change for the worse. We can look out our window and see both those examples, or all those examples, like across the street from us. I think like the big thing for us is, we would love to keep the character of the neighborhood, and I don't really see how we could do it without this variance, and that's why we're kind of looking to kind of amass the support that we can, and present a good case to the BOA.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions? So Trupti, are we leave this up posted? It is on the agenda. There's a link to this so people can look at it. And the idea would be that this period would be where people can go review this. They can ask questions for next month's meeting, and then we would take a vote to approve or deny a letter of support.
Yeah, and what we've done kind of as a matter of practice, however, it doesn't get as much engagement as we would like, but as a matter of practice, we'd like to continue doing it a certain way to be just fair, open. So one of the things that we've done is, along with the recording of this, which will obviously have this conversation, we would send out a survey with links to the documentation and the links to this recording, and just ask people, what they would they support us providing a letter of support or not, and keep a space for questions. And then next month, we will take a vote on this along with the committee and go from there. That's kind of has been our practice. We may not get a lot of engagement on this, but it's something we're working on. But to be fair, and this is what we put every letter of support through as a matter of practice, and also for transparency reasons, right? We as a group do not want to be making decisions for everyone, because they weren't participating on this call. So that's the process we'll take. So if, and I don't, like you said, you have already started the process. You haven't gotten a hearing date yet. Is that right? Or do you?
We do not. Nope. I assume it's going to be the August 8th.
Okay, August 8th. Okay, I think that is reasonable. If we get the survey out and leave it open at least like 2-3 weeks, I think we would be in time. When is our next meeting though, Rod? Because that could be after,
That's going to be after, I believe.
that would be an issue, and we might have to just have this thing open, and then our land use committee group will have
Yeah,
to.
second Thursday. Oh, is the 10th.
Okay, so we will leave this open for like 2 weeks, and then we will have to convene as a, you know, as the committee members to say, hey, based on what we heard here, based on, you know, what we, this conversation here and what we got feedback from, we'll move forward with that. You know, I mean, I'd love to see if anybody on this call right now, I'd love to get like a little skeleton poll. If anybody sees anything problematic, anybody have any concerns, or, you know, you support this, I would love to hear from Luke and Bill, who are, you know, neighborhood residents, are on this call right now.
Maybe they're on the call. Oh, there's Bill.
I'm in support of it.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, no issues from my end.
All right, great.
All
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. So I'll get this out along with this recording, and I'll do it by Monday at the latest.
We really appreciate that. You understand
you.
the process, and
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And we're just about on time. So sorry, Sung, we're a couple minutes late, but so Jonas and Jasper, just give me a call or shoot me an email if you have any other further questions, and I'll talk to Troopty afterwards, and we'll get that survey going.
Yeah, good luck with everything, guys.
Thank you.
thanks. Bye.
All righty. See if I can unshare. There, I'm going to stop sharing. So if I didn't know, Sung, if you had a presentation that you'd like to do. I know you and Troopty talked about sort of what you'd be talking about today. So if you have something you'd like to present, feel free to share.
I do. I think Trippy asked to kind of present on the MPI and how it kind of fits within the planning world, and then just the plan structure, key concepts coming out of there, and kind of how to engage in this phase. So I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Sung. One of the challenges we've had, and we've seen this in all of the engagement, including the NPI engagement, including every time we have, you know, someone present about it, is obviously like low engagement, but also we're not sure if it's too overwhelming. So we're trying to figure out how to maybe break this up a little bit, maybe do more than one call, and start with the structure, the document, how it'll be used, how people, you know, can navigate the structure and kind of understand it. And then this is another thing I'm going to open up, which is going to be questions about NPI, and we'll start collecting it, you know, starting Monday, and gather them, and then we will talk about those in upcoming meetings. So Sung, I would say the next 2 meetings, the second Thursday of the month, please put yourself down for this. I think, you know, we'll try to continue this kind of as a series, and see if that's helpful for more people to be able to understand this draft and maybe not be so overwhelmed. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I do have it down on my calendar. I'll be out of office at least for the next one, but my team members will be there for the meeting. So.
No, you're muted, Troopty.
Sorry. Would Puma be appropriate? Like, would Naomi be an appropriate individual to have on the next call if you're not there? What I don't want is someone who maybe can't answer questions on our call. So who is that? Is that Fernando? Is it someone?
Yeah, it's Fernando. He's well versed with the project content and such. So it might be Fernando plus someone else. Okay. We have a new principal in charge that's kind of managing the NPI program overall. So that's Scott Robinson, and he's also very familiar with the substance of everything as well.
Thank you.
So yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and do the slideshow here. Okay. So okay, cool. Seems like it's working. So So just a quick agenda overview again. We're just quickly, many of you probably saw this about, what is the near Northwest area plan, just a little bit about where we've been and what the current phase is, and then the plan overview and structure. So those are the three main things that I prepared for. So again, when we talk about the near Northwest area plan, as many of you know, we're talking all the way from Chaffee Park into Sunnyside, Highland, and Jefferson Park. So White Plan, again, it's an opportunity to just step back, think long-term in the next 20 years about how we can come together as a community, create a shared vision to help guide investments in the neighborhood, whether that's private or public. So what the plans do is, again, is just helps create a long-term vision, but not just necessarily the vision, but also very specific strategies and next steps to help achieve them. So it helps inform, again, decision making, both for the public in terms of public investments, rezonings in the area, any regulatory changes, and then also helps guide private development as well. So what plans don't do is, again, this is a policy document, so it doesn't create changes to regulations right away. There's no specific budgets for the plan, but it helps guide those decisions in the future, whether it is regulatory changes or capital improvement kind of funds and go bonds and things of that nature. So one kind of key component of the neighborhood and small area plans is that it must be consistent with a lot of the citywide plans that we have. So when we talk about citywide plans, it's the citywide comprehensive plan, the citywide land use plan, Blueprint Denver. So it's an opportunity to not only just be consistent with it, but also customize the kind of citywide strategies at a neighborhood level and make adjustments as part of this process. So just quickly, where we've been in the past 3-4 phases, just some pictures from engagement. We started this process off in the summer of 2021. And just to give you guys an idea of where we're at, that arrow should be a little bit on the right. But now we're in the process of reviewing the full draft plan with the community. So a recap: in phase one, we talked about the likes, dislikes, the big ideas for the future from the community members, and then working with residents and community members in the area, we were able to identify some of the common issues and opportunities to kind of build on the community conversation. So in phase two, that's what we did. We kind of narrowed in on the key and reoccurring themes we've heard to discuss that in greater detail about, what are the issues and how can we start solving for them to help develop some of the initial recommendations. And then phase three was all about kind of refinements, getting early feedback on some of the ideas that we've been putting out. And then just in certain topics where we just needed a little bit more direction, we looked at a few alternatives, mostly related around some land use ideas. So what's next? Phase four is the draft plan review. And I'll quickly go over kind of how we're approaching or getting feedback from folks. So we did hold a community workshop on June 22nd. Many of you were there. Rod, Troopy, it was nice seeing you guys. But also it's another way to get involved is to be able to read and comment directly on the plan. So if you go on the project webpage, there's an interactive webpage where you can scroll through and make direct comments. We also have online surveys, as we typically do in the process. And then we also have a general comment form if people would rather just, write down their thoughts and to be able to provide that to us. And then the other thing we're doing is we're doing a lot of pop-ups and asking people if they want to schedule a virtual meeting to just reach out to me. So we're doing various kind of in-person events to just kind of be out more in the community and engage folks. So some of the ways to get involved, again, this is just a screenshot of what it looks like on the website. If you guys have seen it, you can kind of scroll through the table of contents, drop in a pin, write your name down, and then write your comment down. And then the how to get involved page on the website is kind of your catch-all of the direct links to the survey, direct links to the draft plan, and then some of the kind of pop-ups that we're doing. So for example, will be at the La Raza Park Holistic Health Fair on July 15th. And so other things kind of come in that we're working on as well. So here's the plan overview of the draft plan. I'm just going to quickly go over the plan contents from an organization standpoint, but then also kind of summarize the key takeaways and kind of recommendations coming from each of the section. So in the intro, what's kind of helpful to kind of get your main takeaway message in terms of key themes we've heard throughout the process is to read the executive summary. So typically in the plan, we categorize everything from, land use, transportation, quality of life, but the executive summary, it does a better job of just kind of tying it together and also showing you within these kind of plan goals, we're calling them, how the different policies in the plan help achieve them. And so the other part of the introduction is the equity analysis. So in Blueprint Denver, if you're familiar with it, they have 3 indicators of equity: improving access to opportunity, reducing vulnerability to displacement, and expanding housing and jobs diversity. So this kind of outlines a little bit more clearly about how the policies consider and address equity as defined by Blueprint Denver. And then for the next several slides here, I'll just get into the kind of the meat of the recommendations, and also just feel free to stop me if any questions come up. I'm also just happy to just take them at the end as well. So in terms of land use and built form, sorry, something just popped up on my screen. So in terms of the land use and built form, it helps kind of define the vision for our built environment. So things related to land use, urban design, historic preservation. So this kind of first slide summarizes the key takeaways and recommendations for our mixed use places. So the first one is just being thoughtful about growth and kind of responding to the way that the community desired growth to occur in the neighborhood. So is to be able to direct growth in mixed use areas that's responsive to the context, meaning that we're allowing higher intensity growth near transit. Near transit and what we're defining as mobility hubs. So you can find those, I guess, in Sunnyside along near the 41st and Fox Station, 41st and Inca, I guess that's what I meant. And then along 38th and along Federal, and then encouraging some moderate intensity interior to the neighborhood. So things that are smaller in scale compared to what might occur along some of the along Federal and 38th. And then the second point is what we're calling kind of creating more vibrant mixed use places. So in these mixed use areas, making sure that we're elevating the design of buildings and streetscapes. And also a big component of that is just requiring active street level uses. So I know this has been a big conversation along 44th. So our recommendations kind of address that, and as well as kind of around these mobility hubs where it's going to be more active, have more kind of people kind of walking around and accessing transit. And then the third point here is to preserve and celebrate. So we also have recommendations in these areas to help promote adaptive reuse, so that we're also preserving the past. So I think one of the probably good examples of that, it might be like the 41st and Tejon types of streetcar corridors where people really enjoy it as is today, and to be able to celebrate and preserve those places. And the second kind of big component of land use and built form of this section is the how we address housing diversity. Really the approach here for missing middle housing, so housing between 2 to 19 units, is to increase housing options along major corridors between those mixed use nodes. And then within the low residential areas, so more interior to the neighborhood, we have some nuanced strategies that try to balance preservation, but also compatibility and ways to promote affordability in the neighborhood. as missing middle housing occurs. So that's another key component of the land use and
Hey,
built
Son,
form
can you-
section there.
So can you talk a little bit about that specifically? It's kind of easy to understand the corridor side of it.
Yeah.
But when you talked about the nuance and we're looking at this, is it, I mean, if you can point out, is it the ADUs, preservation bonus, tandem house, side by side? Which of these things that are on here are the ones that you're thinking about in the interior?
Yeah, are you talking about the diagram here?
Well, I'm talking about the diagram. It's on the diagram where you're talking about the,
Yeah.
Houston residential. And I'm trying to understand, like, are all of these are things that you're saying would be allowed in the interior, like the multiplex, the triplex, the tandem, or some of them? I just want to understand.
Yeah, it really depends on the context. I think this diagram is a bit of a catch-all of all concepts, but they're all geographically based. So, I guess starting from the preservation bonus, those are kind of encouraged in areas where through our historic context studies that were identified as potentially historically significant. But there are also kind of areas along, major transit corridors and carriage blocks where we're saying, triplexes, multiplexes, cottage core homes that are more compatible with, the traditional homes that have existed should be allowed. So I think it'll vary by block on how this might take form, but this is just more of an illustration of if you had a block that overlapped in all these areas, what it could potentially look like, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, for
but yeah, I'm happy to also. Sorry.
I was thinking for following calls, and I'm kind of saying this out loud for other people to kind of think about, how, do we dive into something like this? Like, do we look at Sunnyside and look at the areas and say, what would happen on this block? What are the recommendations that would apply on, I mean, obviously corridor like Tejon and 44th, that makes sense. They're the, real corridors, but like if we were to look at Umatilla, what would happen there? What would be allowed there? I'm wondering if we can, for future calls, we kind of hone in on the neighborhood and where preservation bonus is, going to be most applicable versus triplex, something like this. Something for future to dive into to make it, what's the word I'm looking for? But, relevant as we're looking at this and not abstract. For folks to kind of understand what could happen on your block or what can't happen because it doesn't fit into this context.
Well, could I jump in here? Like I was at the beginning, Soon, you were talking about how this is just informs the decision making, doesn't actually make the decisions. So what you're saying is all of these, just for clarity for my sake, all of these options that are presented here in NPI, they just are options that then will have to be looked into by, say, zoning department, looking at the interior of a block that, let's say, currently is either zoned UTUC1 or whatever, or USUC1. And they would have to look at an area and say triplex may be applicable here. So when NPI is finally adopted, it's not actually going to be as fine-grained as picking out areas where triplexes may be relevant. It's just putting together a set of tools that zoning would then look at and then work through whatever that process looks like to remap those areas. Is that how this would work?
Yeah, I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think that's correct. So basically, this is the policy guidance for a future kind of zoning or map related or text amendment project to help implement this. So, I mean, one example potentially how it could go is that maybe within the TU zone districts, there's a text amendment that would say, that would outline the rules of this preservation bonus and say it's applicable in kind of areas identified as potentially historic by X document or something. So so it won't guide individual projects right away, but it will guide the rulemaking for a future project that would allow this to happen, if that makes sense.
Yep. So for example, if we as a neighborhood decided that a certain area of the neighborhood we felt should progress a certain way, we could then start that discussion process and say, and with like, say, planning and zoning, and say, we want to sort of implement some of these tools that were laid out and spelled out in NPI. Here's what we were thinking. And then we would work as a neighborhood with planning and zoning to help implement some of those tools.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's correct. And then I think, as part of the MPI process too, is that, if you guys feel strongly about how it's mapped one way or another, or you feel like another transit corridor should be considered, I think that's really the time for discussion right now is, as you're looking at these maps and you're like, well, I know like the historic context study called this area out, but we don't think it really makes sense. Then, we can have that conversation and make some adjustments.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to, because there was some uncertainty. I've heard people talking about, what does this mean for the neighborhood? What doesn't it mean? And the idea of this spelling out that like, oh, multiplex is an option. Well, that's not something that, like, say, a developer can say, well, say I should be able to put a multiplex on this what's currently zoned a single family lot. That doesn't give a developer the tools to do that sort of thing. This is more just an overall high level guidance that then we would have to decide as a neighborhood, and planning and zoning would have to implement in the longer term.
Or does
Correct.
it? Or does it? If it's a big lot and it's big enough for them to build a triplex, what would actually, what would stop them? I'm not saying that there should be something. I'm just trying to understand, because one of the things you just said, Sung, was, if you think these aren't the right corridors and it should be different corridors, right now's the time to talk about it. And you haven't finished this. So, but like me personally, I'm like, I don't know which corridors we're talking about, and I don't know which corridors I should be thinking about instead of one corridor. This is where I think that it's hard for someone who isn't living and breathing this to be able to even jump in and even have the kind of input that could make changes, even though, they may not agree with this, but they may not understand what they're agreeing or not agreeing with this about. That's kind of where, as I'm looking at this, that's where I'm struggling, and I'm struggling more for not myself, but a lot of other people who are going to see this and not understand that there's an option. There might be a different corridor where the intensity should be. And maybe it's on a different map. Maybe we're going to cover it here, but how do we, how as a committee and, an advocate for our neighborhood, how do we make this easy for everybody else to be able to understand this? That's where I'm struggling.
Yeah, and there's a map that pairs with all this stuff. It's I think it's on page 53 of the land use and built form section. And oftentimes what we'll try to do is focus on the concepts themselves, because so the corridors that we highlight are some of what we're calling key transit corridors. So basically, like 44th, Tejon, the busier streets that have a frequent transit route. So that's typically how we would describe it, is that, these are busier streets with frequent transit services, and that's where we're allowing some of these housing options to go. So when we explain it that way, it's easier to comprehend instead of, trying to locate yourself on the map. But yeah, so the map itself is actually on page 53. So we try to kind of summarize and kind of outline the different priorities we're trying to consider, because I think that's the important part for most people, is just understanding, what are we trying to balance and accomplish, and hopefully the concepts themselves are summarized in a way that can speak to that a little bit better in the plan.
So
for everybody, anybody that's on here, that it's just Bill, really, and he probably has the link, but I just put the link in there to the draft. So if anybody wants any of this information, it's in the chat.
So currently Tejon and 44th are the identified corridors. And I'm not saying, but I'm saying this for folks who may see the recording, if they felt 46 and Pecos
46 is as well. So
yeah,
sorry.
46. Okay, good. All right. So on those corridors, any of these options or, are possible to add the incremental density. And of course, that depends on how big the lot is and all other things, but any of these options, so the triplex might be more appropriate on the corridor versus some other block.
Yeah, that's correct. So like the triplex we're saying could be appropriate along those corridors, and then the preservation bonus obviously are appropriate in the areas that are mapped as well. So they're all mapped together. So you can see how they kind of layer on top of each other in the plan.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
No problem. So moving on to the economy and housing one, this is kind of actually broken out in the plan itself, but in the topic of affordable housing, I think at the start of the process, we heard a lot about making sure that we're demonstrating support for wealth building opportunities, and making sure we have anti-displacement tools and policies in place. So we talk, things about a community land trust or developing a land trust specific to the near Northwest area to help increase access to home ownership. So that's kind of one idea that's coming out of it. Social services, making sure there's a network of services that can serve our more vulnerable populations by working with service providers in the area. Supporting local businesses, obviously huge in the north side about through a variety of means, whether that's funding or helping create capacity and organization among the various commercial districts throughout the neighborhood, demonstrating support for that. And then the last one is really supporting job growth and working with community partners like the schools in the area to make sure these opportunities are connected to residents. For mobility, I think really for this process, there is a huge desire to prioritize ped and bikes in the neighborhood. So one of the three kind of key ways we do that in the mobility section is identifying very specific corridor improvements. This will make more sense in the map that follows after this page. But basically, we've identified some of the key streets that connect the different neighborhoods together that people use more frequently. And so we have identified those streets and the different kind of improvements to make based on the different modes of travel. The second one is the bikeways and trails. Again, there's a big push for ped and bike safety and infrastructure in the neighborhood. So there's a specific section that talks about the bike network and highlighting areas where we want to upgrade existing facilities or consider new ones. And then the last one here that I wanted to highlight was just traffic calming and again, pedestrian safety. So we have a traffic calming map and also a map that highlights kind of where we want to prioritize improvements to existing intersections and crossings, and then also opportunities to incorporate new ped bike crossings, because we know that there are several barriers that divide the neighborhood, including the freeways and railroad tracks. So this is kind of a map that's at the beginning of the plan that helps highlight some of these key concepts. So again, the streets highlighted in red are what we're calling balanced corridors. So that's where you will find more of the detailed kind of improvements that we're envisioning for some of these streets. The connectivity loop is something we've ran by the community early on, this idea of combining ped and bike infrastructure with opportunities to incorporate more tree canopy and water quality improvements to create some urban trail that connects all the neighborhoods together. Another key concept that's worth mentioning are these shared street opportunities. Opportunities where maybe the curb can be at the same level with the street to be able to close it down for festivals and make it really, prioritize pedestrian experience there. And I talked a little bit about the new ped bike crossings that are recommended to plan. And then lastly, mobility hubs and bus rapid transit. So there's, recommendations for incorporating bus rapid transit along 38th and Federal, and along those lines to incorporate what we're calling mobility hubs, which are essentially bus stops and bus stations with enhanced amenities, whether that's a shelter or places to sit, or opportunities to access shared bikes and those kind of facilities. And lastly, this is I think the last one for quality for the recommendation section is the quality of life section. So the first one, it really talks about culture and belonging. So how can we support initiatives and programs that help celebrate the diverse identities of Northside and community building in general. The second one is about how we can incorporate new park space to serve a growing population and incorporate green infrastructure to help improve water quality in the area and reduce impervious surfaces. And the third, this is a little bit more applicable to Chaffee Park and Sunnyside, is increasing food access through multiple ways, including recruitment of a grocery store, support for existing kind of stores that already provide healthy and affordable food, and then other kind of creative ideas to help address food access from multiple angles. So in each of the sections of the quality of life, we have these kind of key concept maps that highlights kind of what I talked about a little bit before the slide about new opportunities for parks and open space, parks to prioritize in the future for future visioning efforts to kind of reprogram the park space and identify improvements, expansions to some of the existing rec centers. Aslan has been a big one in the making, and kind of what we've heard a lot about, a new parkway. So a new kind of contemporary parkway along 46 so that it connects into the Berkeley Historic Parkway at 46 as well, and making sure that the improvements to the bike facility is of high quality and higher levels of protection. And then the last one is tree canopy and water quality green streets. So these are streets that have been identified that helps connect the different park systems together, and where we want to prioritize additional tree canopy, and then also ways to kind of improve water quality. Yep, Chuki.
Yeah.
So,
Hi.
Sorry,
I'm looking at the the new parkways, and the one thing that keeps, I've been thinking about this for a while, which is striking is, and correct me, 46 is also where the bridge is coming in from Fox Park?
No, 47.
47. Okay, perfect. I was just, so this, and then on like the previous map where you had all the corridors, there were two connections with the blue boxes around there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, if
This one.
Yes, you've got the one at around 45th with an arrow going into Globeville, and then you've got the other rectangle, blue rectangle, going over Clay. So these are new potential connections in the future. What I want to make sure is that these connections, and in this plan, that a couple of words are in there. For instance, bike and pedestrian only, because we've already heard about the 47th Avenue Bridge that was only going to be bike and pedestrian, and magically it became automobile. So I want to know whether these are slated to be bike and pedestrian. I think you've said that, sung in emails to like other people who asked, but is that something that can actually make it on this map so that there's no real question or a loophole that we leave open about what infrastructure actually gets built? Because I do think people would care if the Clay became, anything other than bike and pedestrian. And it makes sense for bike since Clay is a bike way.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, that is the intent. So,
Can those words get in the document so that this intent isn't lost or evolves when, you're not around talking about this anymore?
Yeah, I can make sure that's incorporated. It's in several different places, the way it's described. So, but yeah, to emphasize that, I think I can review that and see how we can incorporate that.
Great, thank you.
So the next two, these I'll cover the last two slides, and happy to take questions or do a more detailed discussion in some of this content that I presented. But for each neighborhood, we have neighborhood sections. And at the beginning of them, we have kind of what's called a summary map, which highlights some of the key opportunities for each neighborhood. So this is just kind of a easier way to kind of engage if you're wondering what are the main takeaways from my neighborhood. It's a good kind of one-page summary to do that, and also cross references to the more specific policies and language that describe this. So just to kind of point at a few, for Sunnyside, again, we talked about the expansion of Aslan Rec Center, the kind of activation along West 44th Avenue, the celebration of the streetcar commercial nodes, improvements to 46th Avenue to really make that a contemporary parkway for the neighborhood, and improving crossings across what we just described along I-70 and the railroad tracks. And then another key component of the neighborhood section is we've identified what we're calling focus areas for each neighborhood. So these are general groupings of places that require additional attention and guidance to kind of help articulate and show how some of the plan goals are being achieved. They often have some illustrative drawings to showcase how different plan recommendations can help come together to advance the vision. So for Sunnyside, it's the northeast Sunnyside area, which includes the industrial areas along with Quig Newton, and then also kind of down into 41st and Inca. So this section kind of helps describe and articulate some of the vision that we're hoping to accomplish in the future, and then kind of more specific recommendations to help us get us there. So that's kind of all the overview of the content, some of the main takeaways that are in the plan.
So I have a question that goes back to the mobility section in particular. And some of all of this stuff has been expressed as sort of like the vision, and that it's going to inform the decision-making process going forward. Yet some of this stuff is already being enacted. Other things are proposed and still, just sort of going into the NPI as future sort of guidance. And what the main thing I'm talking about is sort of these bike routes and the feedback we've gotten from some of our constituents, where there's complaints about like the stuff that's already going in with the roundabouts and the different areas, and which ones work and which ones don't. And I bike a lot of them and drive a lot of them all the time just to see how they work. And you can tell that in some areas they're just not working as well as in others. Is commenting in the NPI the appropriate place to sort of bring up concerns about some of this infrastructure that's going in now and just recently has gone in? Or is that better to address through other venues? And what I'm mainly thinking about is some of the stuff that's the most problematic I've seen are, well, a couple of the roundabouts, but mainly like, for example, along Clay Street, they've put in some of the traffic calming devices. There are these odd sort of like painted yellow islands that certain intersections, where then what they've had to do is put in no parking strips along there, which no one listens to. So basically you just drive over the painted island anyway, because there's cars on both sides, and they're obviously not working the way they intended them to. Is the NPI the best place to make these comments, like go onto there? Or is it something that we should address more with the Dottie and those sort of infrastructure things?
I would probably say Dottie, and where I've heard that feedback, I've passed along to some of the project planners in that area, and I'm happy to connect you personally to them as well. But mainly because this is going back to the point about like the NPI plans don't set out specific engineering drawings and plans. It's really just thinking about the larger network and such. So I would say maybe for very specific feedback on the infrastructure that they're implementing to, create these bikeways that we're identifying in the plans, it's probably better and more efficient to actually directly say that to the engineers and planners that.
Okay. Yeah, I
implemented
just
it.
didn't know because it sort of tends to get adopted, and it's obviously things that are getting put in right now, so it's already existing by the time this gets adopted. So
Yeah, and really the process is like these are really big and long corridors. So once adopted, if you look into the recommendations, it'll provide some general parameters and things to explore. But similar to the CTN project, another transportation planner will have to take this and then to be able to work with the community on the details. Typically, they go through the 40-60% kind of design to be able to actually plan it out. So this is just a roadmap on which corridors to look at, what to
Right.
consider, and then work on the more detailed improvements with the
and
community.
I think we have the links to those people, right, Troop D? For
Yeah, we do. And
Yeah.
I think the issue is education and enforcement. Kind of, what do you do with these islands? I've looked at this and I'm like, am I as a biker supposed to be on the island standing there going? But then
Yeah.
the enforcement being the people who are supposed to not park there are still parking there. So if
Yeah.
both of those things aren't working, the whole thing fails, even if it was perfectly designed and engineered. Rod, maybe later in the fall, if you want to do a educational bike ride through the community.
Yeah, I'm by far a casual biker, but I just pay attention because I use clay quite a bit and I bike down it. And I just noticed I watched the guy even on street sweeping day, he did not ticket the people in those newly designated non-parking areas. So I saw him drive right past it, and he
Wow.
drove the parking, in the Jeep. That guy drove right on the yellow island, right past all the cars parked in the newly designated no parking zones. And I was,
Maybe it was
if I
his
was a
friend. Maybe
What's
it was
that?
his friend.
Yeah, well, I could see why the residents along that street that normally park there, they basically lost their on-street parking, and because that thing is, I don't know, a quarter of a block long. It's a pretty long yellow strip. I just was kind of curious as to how those decisions were made. So I'll reach out to the Dottie people. If they're interested in feedback, I don't even know if they are. Just some of it works really, really well. And then other areas I just noticed, I was like, hey, this could use some redesign right here. So
they have an inbox. They have a general inbox for all feedback. And I think that's where they're directing everything to.
Yeah.
We had them come talk to us. But you're right. There's still this, people don't know what to do. And I don't know what to do as I see this either. But might be worth a bike tour one of these days as just something to do with our group and Dottie, and stop and talk about why things aren't working. But as we go, as we pass a corridor or a particular intersection where something isn't working, we would identify something like education and enforcement. And I think that's a problem.
I will say I have noticed at roundabouts, it has gotten what I perceive as significantly better, because more and more people seem to understand now. At the beginning, when they first went in, people are just blowing right through that stuff. And I almost saw daily T-bone accidents at those intersections. And now you see people are using them more like a roundabout. So there is sort of a learning curve period too that I'm aware of, that we have to sort of give people time to adjust.
We got Luke. Maybe we can make reels about how to use these things and, do the videos and post those kinds of things.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, little sunny side.
Smarter about how we educate. But yeah, let's get coming back to NPI. Sung, that was really good. Thank you for focusing on it. It looked like you were focusing on key recommendations out of each of those big areas. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that is good. And I think, what I'd like to talk about with the, unfortunately Bill dropped off, is how do we structure that next meeting? What would be of value? And this is open. I'm not sure. I'm looking for ideas. Is it, Rod, we take a whole hour and we open up that document where you can pin and put comments in and do that as a group? I mean, that's an option. We could do that, or are we collecting questions and we do a FAQ situation for the next round? What would make sense for how we kind of do this series that it would give most value to people?
I thought about as and let's just face it, it's you and I on here again, Troopy, by ourselves. I would love to see more community involvement, but as a neighborhood organization, I'd like to see how we could, I know this is being adopted and reviewed and it's wrapping up and it's finalizing, but see how we can engage as a neighborhood organization to get the best results out of NPI when it's finally adopted that our neighborhood wants to see. Is that just individuals going on and making comments, or is that us as a neighborhood organization really going on there and making comments about the different areas and how we see the neighborhood going? Is there opportunity for us to engage with this final review section of NPI like that?
It's now, I think.
Now, but how is that process? How is that facilitated other than Troopy and I, going on there by ourselves, or is there a more formal process that can be, between the SUNI itself and NPI, or is it better just individuals to make our comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been done differently before. I think some organizations, I think in past plans, have done exactly what you're describing, where you guys obviously hear what's going along a lot in the neighborhood, what people value, what people don't like, and then they make a value judgment call and provide the comments based on maybe what you think or what you think the neighborhood thinks. Other times people have written maybe like formal letters of like areas these are areas that we really think should be reconsidered or refined based on what we've heard from neighbors. So I think it's been done a variety of different ways, really.
Okay, well, I mean, and I think this all stems from the fact that we don't have a current neighborhood plan. Like, we don't have I think everybody agreed that the old Sunnyside neighborhood document or whatever is well outdated. And if we had something like that was more current, those sort of things probably would be looked at in more earnest by the NPI people. But since we don't have something that's current, is there any these type of methods to sort of with knowing that we don't have time to put something like that together, that we're really behind the 8 ball as far as Sunnyside goes?
Well, I mean, one idea that I'm just thinking about now is that I showed you guys that plan on the page summary for Sunnyside, and again, I think the people you're describing are the people that probably wouldn't want to spend more than 10 minutes opening up a PDF. So an idea would be, if, hey, the NPI plan's out, here's a 2-pager about some of the key things that are coming out of here. What do you guys think? And starting the conversation that way.
That's a good idea.
I think that's the most digestible content for each neighborhood. I think so. So I think if you want more eyes on it and more feedback on whether this is heading in the right direction, that's probably the best bet. Especially things like the big ideas like the 46th Avenue Contemporary Parkway. I think we've heard that that's been been supported throughout the process, but I think it doesn't hurt to kind of reaffirm that in this.
Reiterate, yeah. Well, I appreciate your explanation today, because I mean, even as many times as I've met you today, I got a much better sense. I know they break it up into 7 sections, but really there's 4 things in there, like 2 through 5. So it's the land use, the housing and economy, mobility, and then quality of life. It's really 4 things that this thing addresses. The other stuff's more about implementation and just overviews. And that makes it much more easy for me to describe to neighborhood folks when I say, look, there's 4 things we're looking at here. That's something that somebody can get their head around.
So right. And there's another couple of things that, I mean, I've seen it so many times. So we've got these 4 buckets, right? These categories. Then within them, there are the
nuances.
There's challenges, and then there's opportunities and recommendations. So we've got 4 areas. What are some of the problems? What are some of the recommendations that address some of the problems? And then we have the maps that kind of highlight where and how we're addressing all of those. So I'm thinking could we have a NPI for dummies put together that that is very down to, here's the key things, here's the key corridors, here's the key, and what we need to find out is, did we get the problems correct? And do the recommendations align? And what I will add, Sung, and this is more from being on the steering committee, a higher level kind of concern I have is, how many of the recommendations are already in Blueprint Denver, and we are just regurgitating them? But if we, in the 10 years, never figured out how to fix it, identifying it again as here's the solution. I mean, how many of the solutions are actually new and not just, rinse and repeat of solutions we've already identified? Because to me, that is where this is of value versus this is just comprehensive light, and I don't know if that's the kind of comparison we can put together to kind of that. And then one more page would be, here's where it's adjusting Blueprint Denver. So focus in on what that has been adopted as Blueprint Denver. This NPI is changing. For instance, our community center has moved, right, from where we had it to where we're putting it. So I'm wondering, like, that for dummies, light and hone in right on opportunities, problem areas, recommendations, update to Blueprint Denver, maps, and then really what's actually new here, because I don't know that there is anything new.
I like that what's new, because like every time I get a new update to my software, they always have like a little video that's what's new in the new, like before I download it, I want to know like what's new. So that is actually, is there a way to sort of discern that, or is that kind of that's getting deep into the weeds of somebody having to go through there, right?
Yeah, I think part of it is,
I could take a stab.
when we describe what's new, people have to know what exists today, and that can we outlined that kind of in a plan of what changed from Blueprint. But I think where we found value most is just focusing in on like what is the vision, what people would want to see, because I think people do have a hard time of like doing a cross comparison. So it's sometimes easier to figure out like, here's a place, like what is it that you want to see, instead of going back from like what it was and what it is now. Because I think that can be a bit difficult for people from what I've experienced in the past. And I guess that's why I kind of bring up the neighborhood plan summary map, is because that is really the NPI, for lack of better words. NPI for dummies is that one page kind of takeaway and summary of everything that is new, or how we're refining kind of Blueprint policy guidance. Because go ahead.
So Rod, I think you and I need to kind of think about this, because I think our biggest challenge is how to present this to other people in a way that isn't overwhelming, that doesn't just turn them off.
And I think I understand it well enough after so many meetings with Sung, and now today, I think I can because graphics, to get to the dummies who we're talking, the NPI for dummies type of thing. And let's just face it, it's people just have short attention spans, and we need to take it off in very small, discernible bites. Right. I think we can do that with what information Sung's given us today, especially like your presentation today, because it was so much less voluminous than some of the other stuff I've seen, and it really just did break it down to a few key things. So I mean, that was only like 10 slides or something, or 15 slides. That was pretty good.
So Rod, for next meeting, Sung's not going to be there, but we might want to take a stab at this and then dive into some of the pieces. We could talk about how the recommendation for 44th and what we're looking at and asking people about, some of the guidance is already there. We don't know what the tools are, and that's a whole different challenge, is whether are there any tools for the recommendations we're putting in, or are these like future and we'll figure it out? I would love to understand how many of the recommendations have tools already available versus how many don't, and they need to be created, right? I mean, building sounds great, supporting small businesses sounds great, but like, How are we going
Well,
to
and part of this has been not knowing what questions are the right questions to ask for me. Like, and so I think actually this weekend, and Melissa, I didn't know if you knew that. Well, you saw at the beginning, we're having that walking 44th walking tour.
She's in the work group. She can't come there though, right?
Yeah, but I really do hope we get like 20-25 people there that have a shit ton of questions. Sorry for the bad language on the recording. But if they have a bunch of questions, because then we can take those questions and actually direct them, if we need to, back towards the NPI and how that fits into what we're hearing back from people along that walk. So, well, we're coming down to it and it's just us. So, I mean, it's pretty informal. Everybody else bailed out, kind of wrapping up. I don't know. Does anybody have anything else that they want to talk about? If not, I'll just call the meeting and we can get ready for Saturday's walk, Trupti. And
bagels and coffee. And actually, so Sung, Rod and I will kind of ruminate a little bit and figure out like how the next meeting could be useful for folks. And in the meantime, we're trying to figure out how to get more people to this meeting, which is a whole different challenge. Rod, we need to talk about that. We'll kind of talk about that.
Well, and maybe sometime in September or October soon we can reconnect with you after we've maybe taken a first stab at coming up with like what we're thinking about for community engagement.
Actually, why don't we talk about when you guys are wrapping up your feedback period first?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we typically have the draft plan up for about 2 months. So we went live end of June. So we're thinking about end of August as a closing date. And then usually there's a second review draft that comes out to kind of reaffirm
how long does that stay up for?
Sorry?
How long does the second review stay up for?
Usually that one's up for a shorter amount of time, about like about a month or so, because by then we've addressed some of the major refinements.
Okay.
So this looks like it'll be wrapped up by September then.
Yeah, well, the adoption, we're hoping to get the plan adopted by the end of the year. So in August, we'll wrap up the first review draft.
Yep.
It needs another month for us to kind of review all the feedback and comments, make the additional refinements, and then usually followed up by another second review draft. So that would happen. I have my calendar open, but I closed it. But that would happen, I guess, in October-ish or so.
So it's going to go through city planning by October, is what you're thinking? Or
no, we're talking about the second review draft potentially.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was talking.
But that's what I'm saying. If we have something in September where we can kind of bring this home, and in the meantime, we'll have put information together. At least that gives people like about a month there between September and October to respond if there's anything that they really feel strongly about.
Yeah, and I would say probably get involved now. So if there's
but that's the problem. I mean, it's just the two of us on here, and unless somebody watches this video and really reaches out, and like Trupti said, this is the part. And I get it. It's summer. Everybody's busy. It's hard to get engagement, but it really has. Well, since we finished the CO 7 and 8s, engagement has just dropped off dramatically. I mean, it's usually not. I think we've had 6 on here last month, and that was it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's, I think it's our problem on the engagement and our challenge to kind of figure out. And really, Rod, I think, your coffee hours, we might start wanting to use those to really have.
Yeah, I've tried. I mean, like I get like 2 or 3 people every week, every time I have them. So, but those people don't tend to show up on here as often.
And we know that. I mean, Saturday is another opportunity to talk about MPI. In terms of the 20 people who will show up, we could be setting up a time or saying, I think we're going to need to review this with people over and over again, kind of just like how this plan has taken every opportunity to show up at every happy hour or barbecue or 4th of July just to get in front of people. I think we may need to do something similar. And so you and I can connect on this. But, here's the thing. If not, Rod, guess what? You and I can make all the decisions.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, hopefully everything I'm presenting,
we can. We'll put in all the things that we can.
And I do want to reiterate too, I mean, if this is any kind of helpful assurance, is that, like this is an iterative process. You know, we went from talking about the likes and dislikes and grand vision and building off that. So, I mean, this is years of community conversation we're building off of. So, you know, if we were saying anything crazy, I think somebody would have told us by now. So
Well,
I
my
think,
biggest takeaway from tonight was the part about the different tools, like when you were showing the different archetypes of buildings for
Right.
increased housing, that those are just suggestions and not sort of designated for any particular area yet. You know, obviously those ones with the higher density will be along the corridors and those sort of things, but that, you know, once this sort of gets adopted, it doesn't necessarily carte blanche give a developer like, oh, I'm just going to put a triplex in here or a multifamily. It doesn't just open it up for, you know, free for all. There's still going to be a process that gives the neighborhood opportunity to give feedback on those very specific decisions.
yeah. And then again, like the map highlights those key opportunities that I described, but yeah, it wouldn't change the zoning rules right away where, you know, people,
Right.
where if you were identified as a carriage block for some kind of triplex, like you wouldn't be able to just go the very next day and be able to build
Right. And
something.
all of a sudden it's use by right. And we don't have any
Yeah.
say as a neighborhood to, you know, that made me feel a lot better that this, you know, there's still opportunities for us as a neighborhood to give feedback and response to development as it comes about. So, well, we're over time and I don't want to keep you two. Thanks for being involved in our neighborhood. I appreciate it, even though a lot of our people aren't involved. Anyway, and we'll let you guys know how the walk goes on Saturday. So that should be pretty fun for the
Oh, we should have
44th.
drone
floor.
video, drone footage, I hope.
Yeah,
Great.
well,
And
yeah.
then, yeah, I'll be in touch with August. Like I said, I won't be here, but Fernando is well versed, Scott Robinson's well versed, and they'll be able to fill in. So that's needed.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Okay. With
Right,
well,
thank
with
you.
nobody else on the meeting, make a motion, Troop D, to adjourn.
We can adjourn the meeting.
We can adjourn the meeting. All right, guys.
Guys, take
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
See you
you.
soon. Bye.